Oh, I'm so glad you asked. Well, this image originated on Reddit when a user by the name of Zombie Pizzas 1999 reported that if you crank the brightness up in the opening cutscene, James appears to be looking at the player. And while this is a pretty interesting and eerie fact on its own, this single Reddit post managed to fuel several mainstream gaming news articles from websites like thegamer.com, Kotaku, Reset Era, and Game Rant, just to name a few. Only one problem: it's not true. Of the original Team Silent members, the development team responsible for Silent Hill 1 through 4, only one of them is really active on social media, and this would be original series art director Masahiro Ito. Yes, most famously, this is the man responsible for Pyramid Head. After the post began picking up steam, people naturally started tweeting at Ito, asking if he could confirm or deny whether or not this theory is true. He eventually did respond simply by saying that a lot of people had asked him, but it's only a headcanon and James does not look at the player. So why am I bringing this up, you might ask? Well, because that wasn't really the end of it. Almost immediately after Ito debunked this theory, someone responded and asked why, if it were not intended, his eyes would be fully engulfed in shadows, and that shadows conceal. He then responded pretty angrily and said, why did the person who posted the headcanon blow out the image in an attempt to reveal what's in them first? Please refute me logically. He then went on to say that posts from fans like this make him feel like Annie Wilkes from Misery really does exist. The saddest part is, this isn't even the first time he's had to defend himself and even argue with so-called fans on Twitter about what is and is not canonical in Silent Hill. A frequent topic of discussion that fans will have with Ito is the falling snow being ash. And in reality, I can't blame people for thinking this is true, especially if they've only seen the movie and they haven't actually played the first game. However, it seems like Ito is fed up with it. He's gotten so fed up with having to answer to fan theories that he started responding like this. Let me be clear, I don't intend for this to be a full-on video essay. I just want to explain where I'm coming from and how long I've been in this community. My first ever experience with Silent Hill came all the way back in 2003 when the Platinum Hits edition of Silent Hill 2 Restless Dreams was released on the original Xbox. At the time, I was way too young to understand it and certainly too young to be playing it. But it always fascinated me. So during the summer of 2005, I finally sat down and played through both Silent Hill 2 and Silent Hill 3 for the very first time. I got my first hand-me-down computer in 2006 from my dad, and one of the first things I started doing was browsing the Silent Hill forums on GameFAQs. Back in those days, one of the most popular forms of trolling was to tell people that they could unlock secret or hidden items or areas. To unlock this hidden content, you'd have to go to one specific corner of the game, perform some crazy random button sequence, or any number of other ridiculous solutions. You saw this in a lot of Nintendo 64 games, things like Ocarina of Time, Super Mario 64, but surprisingly enough, Silent Hill 2 even had its own version of this. I remember reading frequently on the GameFAQs forums that if you go into Heaven's Night, the Silent Hill strip club, and you stand next to the stage, you stand in one specific spot and press a very specific button sequence. You can actually get Maria to do a pole dance for you. Obviously, this was complete nonsense, and there is no button sequence, there's no data mining that has ever been done to find out that any such thing even exists in the game. But this was the type of innocent trolling that happened before the Silent Hill wiki was established, and the fanfiction and headcanon really got out of control. People theorizing about the way James pronounces his lines, the color of coat that Walter Sullivan wears, and any number of other ridiculous fire starters for these types of theories. It got to the point that I couldn't even tell what was obvious fanfiction and what the wiki was working to establish as fact. That same year, I got around to playing Silent Hill 1 and Silent Hill 4. This was around the time that the Western Silent Hill games started coming out, games like Origins, Homecoming, Shattered Memories, and there's been more than enough retrospectives and overviews of what happened here, so I'm not really going to go into the details. But I will say that there was a pretty sharp decline in the overall quality and presentation of these games, and they all seemed like a half-hearted attempt to copy the story or at least the concepts of Silent Hill 2. In the middle of these Western Silent Hill releases, we got two comics based on the world of Silent Hill, Sinner's Reward and Past Life. Again, both of these comics are blatant copies of Silent Hill 2. It was hard to know who was to blame for all the shameless copying of Silent Hill 2. Was it Konami? Was it the people Konami was hiring to head these projects? Nobody really knew. But one thing everyone always knew for sure is that Silent Hill 2 sold the most units by far. So I can't really blame Konami for moving in this direction from a business standpoint, but I can say that they really cheapened the concepts and a lot of the presentation that was unique to Silent Hill 2 before a lot of these games started being released. So why am I saying all this? Well, because Silent Hill 2 was always the most open-ended of the first 4 games. It's got 4 non-joke endings, and each one of those endings can be true because they don't really lead into any of the other games. It got to the point that people like Tom Hewlett were saying that the fan theorizing is actually an important part of the Silent Hill fan base, and that they were specifically designing games around allowing fans to theorize as much as they possibly could without the games getting in the way and offering any definitive answers. I want to be clear that I'm not blaming Tom for this decision. Most likely he was told by Konami top brass to do this with these projects, and it's really not his fault for trying to level with the fan base and letting them theorize. But it was definitely a pouring gas on the fire situation when it came to the fan fictions that had already gotten out of control and the headcanon that people believed as fact. The innocent GameFAQs trolling then turned into people trying to lecture developers on Twitter about what's in their own game and what's true about their own game. Not only that, the Silent Hill wiki is out of control with different theories being established as fact, things that were introduced in games like Downpour and Book of Memories being used to explain things as far back as Silent Hill 2. Adding to the confusion even further, the Silent Hill movie was mixed in 2005, and it introduced a lot of its own concepts and really kind of went in its own direction. The cult no longer worshiped demons, and in fact they were actually witch-burning Puritans. It's not actually falling snow. It's ash. The town itself was based on Centralia, Pennsylvania, but that's only in the movie. It was never introduced or mentioned at all in any of the original 4 games released by Team Silent. So while we started with a simple set of 4 games that all had a pretty definitive answer as to what's happening, and we've ended up with a situation where developers are encouraging people to theorize even further, making the games even more open-ended and confusing intentionally, the movie being released, which muddied the waters even further, the comics, and most recently, the Silent Hill subreddit. The series itself has been basically dead since 2012. Konami decided to make the genius decision to release 3 Silent Hill games in 1 month, calling it the Month of Madness. This was the HD Collection, Silent Hill Downpour, and Book of Memories. All 3 of these games and projects had such poor reception that they pretty much just shuttered the door on Silent Hill, until very recently, this last October, when it was announced that several new Silent Hill projects were in the works. And I found a pretty interesting divide on the Silent Hill subreddit specifically. There were really 2 main camps, people that were extremely excited that a dead series was being brought back to life, and people based on past experiences that were extremely critical of Konami and suspicious that they would actually be able to pull it off. I think that more than enough has been said about the Silent Hill HD collection and just how botched that project really was, but it really can't be understated how simple this should have been and how hard they fumbled it. So just based on my past experience with Konami, I fall into the latter. I don't know for sure if they can execute on these new projects. I hope they can, and I hope they've learned from their past mistakes and mishandling of the series, but I'm not optimistic. Back around 2011 or 2012, when all the HD collection and voice actor controversy was fresh in everybody's mind, this would have been a pretty sensible opinion. But nowadays, it seems like expressing any disinterest toward these new projects or suspicions or criticism of Konami just leads to a flood of downvotes and angry responses. I don't know exactly where or when this divide happened, but it seems that any negativity or criticism is being brushed off as whining or hating. Take this tweet, for example, when Ito himself said that he can't read all the replies, but he gets the worries that people have. Someone then immediately responded saying, "Ignore the haters. People just love to complain about everything. It will be amazing." And I do love his response saying, yes, but constructive criticism works. It seems like anyone with even a healthy amount of skepticism or criticism toward these new projects is just labeled a hater, or that they just love to complain. Or most hilariously, that they don't deserve new Silent Hill games, or that worst case scenario, Konami may decide that we don't deserve any more Silent Hill. But for someone who's been in the community since 2003 to 5, like I have, I was actually okay with that. You know, it's okay to let good things die. We don't have to continue fleshing out or milking this series for all it's worth when, in all honesty, it's well past its prime. And I know that's tough for people to accept since we're in the era of remakes and remasters, but honestly, I don't know if Silent Hill can succeed in the form of remakes the same way that Resident Evil has. One of the biggest problems is that Konami is still outsourcing this project. They don't have an internal team of people that really know what they're talking about anymore. They're just outsourcing it to different studios that have wanted to work on Silent Hill for a while, And while they might be consulting with people like Ito, and they do have Akira Yamaoka on board to do the sound design and the music, which is great to see, I don't know if they really have all the essential personnel to get this project done correctly. It's tough to make anything related to Silent Hill 2 without Takayoshi Sato, the man behind all of the CG cutscenes and a lot of the emotion and feel behind the character models, and someone like Hiroyuki Iwaku, who wrote the story and just generally had the biggest hand in how well it was done. I don't think I've ever really been a part of any gaming community, or any community online for that matter, that has so much infighting every time a new project is announced. And I'd also like to point out that it's been this way since long before the recent announcements this past October. Even when the Silent Hill HD collection was announced, immediately there were a lot of arguments about whether or not this was a good idea, whether or not they were going to make changes, who was in charge of this project, and the same sort of conversations that we're seeing right now. So from the outside looking in at the current state of the subreddit, which, let's face it, is the biggest collection of Silent Hill fans and obsessives on the internet today, it's really tough to look at it and not see history repeating itself. But I just want to clarify exactly how I feel about these new projects. And I'll just start by saying, I'm cautiously optimistic. I don't know for sure if these are going to succeed, and I don't know if they're going to fail. I've been around long enough to go through hype cycle releases like Duke Nukem Forever, Cyberpunk most recently, and just in general, gaming media has kind of worn me out on the hype machine. You know, E3 coming around every year, trying to get us excited about the newest AAA action game, and more often than not, nowadays these games come out and they're disappointing. I feel like the much more sensible and safe solution is just to wait until the game is out and wait until the reviews are available to come to your own conclusions. I don't want to get into a long story, but these games are very important to me. There was a time in my life, especially as a teen, where my family was basically broke and destitute. And no, this is not a sob story, I'm just explaining my reasoning. So really, all I had to do in my spare time was play these games, and because of that, I do have a pretty strong connection and a lot of nostalgia for them. But I've also been around long enough to be disappointed by a lot of games that I thought were going to be better on final release. We see it all the time. A game is announced at E3, it looks incredible, or it's announced at the Game Awards or wherever, and the graphics are just unbelievable, and then by the time the game comes out, it's been downgraded into oblivion. Sometimes it doesn't even look like the same project. I also have to be honest about Bloober Team. This is the development studio that Konami's chosen to head the Silent Hill 2 remake, and their past games are not exactly anything to write home about. For the most part, they're pretty mediocre, and in a lot of people's opinions, they take a pretty insulting perspective on mental illness. And actually most worrying, while I was in the process of making this video, an article was released by Engadget that Bloober has announced they're done making psychological horror games, with their studio co-founder saying, quote, "Right now we are going into Bloober Team 3.0 making mass market horror." And I thought by the phrasing of this article that it meant that this Bloober Team 3.0 would be put into effect after the release of Silent Hill 2, but it then goes on to specify that Silent Hill 2 will be the public's first taste of Bloober's new direction, and honestly, that worries me. At the time of making this video, there are also a few other projects in the works: Silent Hill F, Silent Hill Townfall, and Silent Hill Ascension. But it's a bit too early to really comment on those. All they've really gotten is one or two promo screenshots and small promotional videos and trailers, so I really can't say much as we don't really know a whole lot about them. So overall, it's a pretty rough situation for the Silent Hill community. On one hand, we have all these new exciting projects coming out, but on the other hand, Konami has not really earned our trust, and they've really dropped the ball on previous projects and ideas. I don't know what the future of Silent Hill as a series or franchise entails, but I do know that we can always revisit those original 4-team Silent games and enjoy them just as much as when they originally came out, because all 4 of them hold up incredibly well. So at the end of the day, let's just look forward to the new projects and try not to take ourselves too seriously. Thank you guys for watching. Fun fact, if you want to call it that, this was actually the first video I've ever made in Adobe Premiere, so please excuse the amateur/lazy editing. I'm just learning myself, but I am live 3 days a week on Twitch, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and the link to all my socials will be in the description.